Alright, hey guys. My name is Christian Millian, and I'm enrolled in this class, and I also work here. So I'm a research analyst in the institutional research and planning department, and so I work a lot with big sets of data, and I got a degree in economics and a minor in psychology from UC Davis, so I'm not a programmer. This is actually the first formal programming class I've ever taken. Everything else I've learned was like kind of self-taught and learned on the job. And a lot of my job, I feel, is Googling how to do something in R, because I use R a lot because it makes it really easy, but I'm not a programmer, I don't have that intuition, so I Google R quite a bit and how to use it. And something about Joe's class that I really liked is he's kind of teaching us how to Google things. It's like how to Google this in processing, this in Python, stuff like that. So for R is, like he was saying, statistics. It's a programming language mainly used for statistics. So it tries to make programming really easy because its target demographic is usually academia, so people who are bio, psychologists, economists, people who aren't typically programmers. And I think Python is really good for data science if you're coming from the programming field. So if you're not coming from the programming field, people generally tend to use R. If you're coming from the programming field, people generally tend to use Python. So what I wanted to do, because I learned about R, and then it took me 2 years to figure out how to load a data set into R, because I was not very good at programming. And I was using other software to do it. Excel was one of those, Stata, stuff like that. So I wanted to give you guys like the basics of how to put a data set into R, and then also some cool things about Googling R that would have helped me and would have saved me like a year's worth of time. So first thing about R, when you download R, you should get something like this. This is the regular GUI that comes in R, but you can go your whole life without ever seeing that again, because most people who use R also use RStudio. And RStudio just kind of is an overlay of R, and it helps you kind of organize everything. So this is what R looks like, and will probably be what R looks like anytime that you Google it. Most people use RStudio. So give me just a second here. So RStudio, this is where your scripts are. Oh yeah.
Probably under File or Editor tools. You get a hit pause on the recording too while we find it. Yeah, there's a
Alright, so we increased the font size just by hitting Control+, and that just zoomed everything in. So this is R, and right off the bat I want to show you guys just how to read in a CSV file that I've got from Excel. And it really is just as easy as using read.csv. Now if we try to run this, it's not going to work. And that's because, so this is the process that I went through when trying to read in a CSV file. R, for some reason, and I think other languages too, you don't want the backslash, you want the /. And that took me, I don't know, maybe a month to figure out. Just because I wasn't constantly using R, and I would copy the file path to the CSV file. I was like, alright, cool, read CSV. Alright, it's not working yet again. And that's because it needs to be wrapped in a string. Cool thing about RStudio is that you can just highlight something and then hit the quotation marks, and it'll wrap it in quotation marks. I don't know if other things do that.
That's the first I've seen of that trick. We'll have to try it in CodeWriter later.
I think CodeWriter does it too.
Yeah.
Makes it nice and easy.
Yeah, that's a slick trick.
So I just read CSV, and then the file path, and then this is the name of the data set. It's central versus faultline.csv. This is a data set of a roller derby game, and these are the statistics of that roller derby game. The Central Valley Derby Girls were playing Faultline Derby Girls or something like that. So now if we hit it,
How are you executing a line?
yeah, so that's just Control-Enter. I think I've got that here. So if you highlight something and hit, or if you're in the line of that thing, hit Control-Enter, and it'll run that line. Alternatively, you could just hit Run right here if you wanted to use the interface. So yeah, so when I hit that, it prints it out into the console here, but that's not very useful. I kind of want to assign this data set to a variable or an object like a data set. So R is kind of interesting in that the assignment symbol is a less than sign and a minus sign combined. And think about it kind of like an arrow. So if I wanted to call this game stats, I'm assigning this CSV file to an object called game stats. And if I run that, we see that game stats as a data frame opens up into my global environment. Something else that I learned is that a matrix is not a data frame, so don't get confused by that. And I'll show you how to make a matrix. And to do that, we need a couple vectors. So I can either write stuff in this script, or I can write it directly in the console. It's hard to see because that little plus sign. So we'll just do it up here. If I just want a list of numbers, say 1 through 20, I want to use the concatenate button or function. But let's say I don't know how to, I don't know what arguments the concatenate function takes. In R, it's really cool if, as long as you've got internet, you just type in a question mark and then the function name without parentheses. So I just typed in, you can't see it, but question mark C. And that pops up over here so that you don't have to go to Google and type in that. And it gives me, these are that's my argument, ... And what that means is just kind of the objects to be concatenated. So it shows you how to use the function, what arguments to put in, and then it gives you a description of those arguments. So we read a CSV file. Let's see what the documentation says for read.
Concatenate means stick together.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like the plus sign in processing is the string concatenation character. So that's how you add two strings together. Cool.
So question mark read CSV. It tells us this is our argument, read CSV. It wants the file name, whether or not the headers are there, what it's separated by. So it's comma separated. So this defaults to, oh yeah, that's important to know. So header is the argument. So like in processing, when we had something called like, is it temp string? This header is like the temporary value, and then it defaults to true. If there's an equal sign in the argument, this is what it defaults to. But you can set it equal to something else. So header equals false would work. So let's create a vector. By creating a vector, we just want C, and then just the numbers 1 through 20. So 1, colon, 20. And the colon is the sequence operator in R. So it just gives us a sequence. And my vector pops up here. And it pops up under values. So something that I had a hard time with is I wasn't used to working with a data frame as a whole. I was used to working with a bunch of variables next to each other that looked like a data frame. So when I first was using R, I had a bunch of vectors, and I was trying to get them to interact with each other, and it was just, I wasn't able to do anything. So if you see something in here, it's typically just a string, or I'm sorry, just a vector. It's not a vector combined with things. And if we look at a data frame, it's just like, these are your variables. We can view it. So this is my data frame. We've got a team variable, what period it was, what jam it was, what position the player was, the player's number, and all these steps, how many points they made. Yeah. So I don't know if anything that I just said made sense, but you know how to read a CSV file into R using RStudio. And one final thing that I want to show you guys is, if you want to learn R, this is really cool, Swirl. So Swirl is a user-defined package. So R is open source, so people create packages or add-ons to R. Swirl will help you learn R. So you have to install packages, Swirl, and it does that for you. Once you've installed the package onto your computer, you want to read it into R. So you use the function library and the package name. And then if I just type in swirl and execute that, Swirl is an interactive course or lesson, like in R. And I like to think of it kind of, Joe had us learn Python the hard way. I'd recommend learning R the hard way using Swirl, but it's much easier than learning Python the hard way. So it's asking, what should it call me? And I'm going to enter it into the command prompt. Call me Christian. Thanks, Christian. It's kind of creepy. Let's cover a couple of quick housekeeping items before we begin our first lesson. 3 dots means enter. And then select 1, 2, 3 to keep going. I'm going to hit 1, press enter. And this is just a little bit of information that tells you about how to use Swirl. Just hit enter. And then this is where it actually begins. So we need to install a course. So I want to install the basics of programming in R, and I can do that by selecting 1. It's going to install that. Then I can choose a course, R programming, and then these are all of the kind of lessons within that course. So I just want to learn the basic building blocks of R, and I'm doing it in R. So in this lesson, we'll explore. And then essentially it's going to ask you to do stuff. So it wants me to do 5 plus 7. Enter that. And then it says that I'm amazing. And that's really nice. So Swirl, I just wanted to show that to you guys, because once you get RStudio and R on your computer, if you just type in install packages Swirl, library Swirl, and then Swirl with parentheses around it, you don't have to know anything about R. It'll guide you through everything, and you can kind of get familiar with it. That's kind of all I have. I feel like it might have been a little confusing.